Good morning, everybody. My name is Jacob Smiley. I'm a designer with Sharon Davis Design, and I'm so happy to be here to share our proposal for the United Nations International Office for Migration in Geneva, Switzerland. So before we get into the project, I want to take a second to share a little bit about our firm and how we connected with the client. So we're based out of New York City, and we work mostly in the field of public interest, partnering with a lot of NGO clients. And our client for this project, the International Organization for Migration, or IOM, is the leading intergovernmental organization in the field of migration and operates under the United Nations mission. And that its goal is to provide humane management of migration worldwide, which really meshed with our firm's ideology and provided us with this really fun opportunity, as we had never done an office building from the ground up before. So the new structure was set to replace part of their current facility. That's the triangular building highlighted in red. And in their brief, the IOM requested sustainable construction practices to be implemented across all phases of design, space for roughly 600 employees, which accounts for future needs and gives the organization the opportunity to consolidate on site, and flexible, inclusive, shared workspaces that bring the facility up to date post-pandemic and enhance collaboration within the work environment. Before looking at our submission, let's quickly take a look at the greater context. So our site is located directly adjacent to the UN campus, which is this area in the top right highlighted in white, and it neighbors a lot of other aid organizations that work directly with the United Nations. The buildings in this part of Geneva are separated by lots of green space, and you wind up with a lot more of these standalone sculptural buildings. Here's a partial view of the immediate context that cites the 3 existing IOM buildings in red on the isometric drawing. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a few more photos of the existing facilities. It's this triangular building built in the mid-'80s. I quite like it. It's not for everybody. So now let's get into how we developed the partie. So since it's the International Organization for Migration, we began by looking at the history of human migration over history, beginning in Africa about 200,000 years ago. Our big idea was to create a building that represents that history through its spatial sequencing. So what we decided to do was embed the support program, which is labeled in gray here, within the office and elevate all the office space above it. The blue and yellow boxes that you see here represent a series of alternating double-height spaces within the offices. Each of one represents each of the 6 inhabited continents in the world. The connection through these double-height spaces allows for a procession through the building, which mimics that pattern of human migration that we've seen throughout history. And in our narrative, we represented this by having field agents return to site and then sort of ceremonially sprinkle their earth that they've pulled from site into the concrete topping of the floor plates. With the partie set, we then began to look at how to incorporate sustainable strategies into this building to fulfill the brief. The goal we set for ourselves was a 40% reduction in embodied carbon, and our main strategy to achieve this was to create a hybrid structure of rammed earth and mass timber framing. Also, in the subterranean levels, where the use of concrete is still necessary for retaining walls and such, we incorporated recycled aggregates from the demolition of the existing triangular building. And what you're left with is the sort of hybrid structure that, at least in regards to embodied carbon, is going to perform significantly better than your typical concrete or steel frame construction. And then, as you can see on the map on the left, we set a 500-mile radius for the sourcing of all materials. This was done not only to cut down on transportation cost, but logistical carbon from construction as well. Additionally, we set out to reduce operational carbon by 40% as well. And you'll all be familiar with most of the strategies we used here. Natural ventilation, all electric systems, photovoltaics on the roof. But what really sets the building apart in this regard is its ability to regulate its temperature using the thermal mass of the Lake Geneva. This is accomplished through connection with the city's Genelac system, which is a piece of urban-scale hydrothermal infrastructure that has been slowly expanding service within the UN District of Geneva over the last decade or so. So now we can finally talk about the building. I'm going to walk you through starting from the ground level and moving up. As you approach the building, you can see a distinct split in materiality that defines the office space and separates it from the support program, the rammed earth on the bottom and the CLT framing and cladding floating above it. The facade of the lobby is entirely transparent on the street level and mimics the organization's desires for transparency within its operations. And the shared, elevated public space that you can see directly above is accessible by all through a gradually sloping plaza that's depicted within the drawings on the left. Moving into the building, you can see how the rammed earth walls express themselves within the interior of the space. In the center of the lobby's atrium is a baobab tree, which in many African cultures and folklores provides shelter, food, and water while representing Africa both as the cradle of humanity and the beginning of our continental procession through the space. Moving up to the office areas, we created a lot of flexibility within the work environment by providing both collaborative spaces and concentration pods sort of distributed evenly throughout the space. The client also requested a healthy work environment for their employees, which we accomplished primarily through selection of low VOC materials, and we benefited from our hybrid structural system as both CLT and rammed earth tend to really perform well in regards to VOC. We also created easy access to nature and biophilia through balconies on the upper levels, which you can see deep in the background of this image, as well as the public places dispersed around site that we talked about on the previous slide. These are meant to serve as social hubs, gathering spaces, and dining areas for employees, while fostering healthy social interactions and providing physical well-being within the space for all employees. On the far left of the rendering, you can see a set of stairs, which is a good segue up to the top of the building. Here, the roof terrace provides employees with even more access to nature, and you can see additional health and wellness amenities, such as yoga studios and meditation rooms, which are provided on this level. Up here, employees are provided with sweeping views of the lake, the city, and the mountains all, around them. So I have a few points in closing. First, migration has been present throughout human history, and the IOM tries to address this in a transparent, noble, and humane way, and the building that we've created for their headquarters reflects those qualities, while greatly reducing carbon emissions and fostering more health and connection for the intended user. Using what might be considered unorthodox materials like rammed earth in tandem with sustainable strategies that are quickly becoming much more popular, like CLT framing systems, we believe we've created an elegant and flexible design solution that demonstrates how to implement these techniques within the confines of an office and captures the client's needs and desires, which is something we felt was worth sharing with you all today. Thank you so much. Open to questions.
Thank you. I'll start with the first question. Can you talk a little bit about that door that we're looking at?
Yes.
Right there, as it seems to be very contrasting to the openness
exactly.
of the entrance on the other side.
The building is kind of contrasts itself in that regard, right? This is sort of the primary facade. This L-shaped, or these two fins that protrude are like that to preserve those three white oak trees. But the front of the building is not there, obviously. It's sort of on the shorter entrance that you see here. That door actually is just connection for employees. It's bike storage over there. So it's the building that kind of flips itself as you move up, right? Like the main facade above is different than the lower levels, which is kind of more of a support function.
Thank you for. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Okay.
I would like to hear a little bit more about the rammed earth strategy and how it functions with the performance of the building.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And also, where do you think it will be sourced from?
So the intention was the earth to be sourced on site. Geneva is the soil tests in Geneva. It's all very good in that regard. They've been using types of rammed earth construction since the Middle Ages there. A lot of the medieval fortifications were done in that regard. So the intention was to source on site using additional excavation that needs to be done for the subterranean levels. And then what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
How does it work?
How does it work?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go to the section real quick. I'm trying to think how this works. So it's all load bearing, right? And you have these systems with the CLT beams and columns that sort of tie into it and distribute the load coming through. So it's all solid mass, load-bearing earthen walls. And then it's only really present on the ground level and then tying through into non-retaining walls in the subterranean levels.
Does it have sort of bioclimatic...
yeah, so it's, it works at really high thermal mass, okay. Right? So it's very good at insulating and retaining temperature in the space. Geneva doesn't have a bunch of temperature swing. It usually stays within the 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I'm American. but it still is, it performs well in that regard. You don't have to insulate the space as much. You don't have to condition the space as much because it's able to sort of hold its temperature well.
I'm not sure I understand the cultural and placemaking
Sure.
allusions that you've described. In the introduction, you showed kind of 6 spaces that are based on the continents.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about how that is represented in the design and the relationship between architecture and culture and how you're representing it?
Yes. So the height restrictions of the building kind of allowed for 7 stories, which we thought was really convenient because there are 7 continents, 6 that people live on. And the idea was these offices would all be connected. So the floor plates are sort of alternating Ls. So you're left with a double height space at the end of each one. If we go towards the rendering here, you begin to see this. So it's a continual procession through the space. The office floors themselves aren't themed per se. It's really, the reference is the earth that we sprinkle through the floor topping.
So architecturally, each of those spaces is similar.
They're similar.
They're named.
Yeah.
So
it's not like the Africa floor or the
Right.
Asia floor. Yeah.
So not unlike being in a hotel conference center where you have, the New York room and the Chicago
Exactly.
room
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
Los Angeles room.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So how do you think, when this is built, one would understand that this building actually is the immigration headquarters of the UN?
Mm-hmm.
Is that legible?
I guess not, right? It would need to probably be outlined in the lower levels, right? We haven't gotten quite that far yet. This is still pretty early days. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Thank you.
Continuing a little bit on that theme about the circulation, I don't entirely understand. Are you saying that because the floors are staggered, when you're circulating, are you going up one area and into your floors, or are you moving through the floors as you rise through the building?
So both, right? There's an elevator core, so you can move directly up to the space you need to go to. But once you hit the office levels, which are separated, because for security reasons, it needs to be separate than the public spaces below, you're able to kind of proceed up through the space. These stairs are the same on each side, so you're kind of able to move up, walk around to the other double height space on the other side, and then continue all the way up as you go.
So I'm looking there at half a plan, is that right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So have you got a whole plan?
Mm-hmm.
Have you got a plan that shows the whole building?
Yeah, so this is the typical office building area, full plate.
That's the whole building.
Double height space on one side, the full plate on the other. So each of these typical bars have
Yeah.
access to 2 sides, zigzagging as you go.
Okay, I get it. That wasn't actually my question. I wanted to know about how it interrelates to the 2 buildings that remain. So your 2 triangles that are still there. On the site plan, it looks like there's a kind of landscape courtyard at level 1 or something. Could you talk a little about that and how the bottom left image, how it relates to the 2 buildings, which I assume are now still being used by the organisation?
Yes, that's correct. So these are meant to stay in operation during the whole construction process, and they're linked through this sort of shared plaza there. I believe the organization intends to demolish those too eventually, and the UN does open source competition for every single building, so those are going to have to relate to the site in some way as well. So there would kind of have to respect them temporarily, but there's going to be something even new there. So it's kind of an interesting challenge for us on how to work with that.
The landscape space that you see on the bottom left there, is that at the roof level? Is it what we see there?
Yes. So just on the left-hand side of this rendering, there's sort of a gradually sloping plaza that leads up, and then you're able to sort of zigzag back. A lot of zigzagging going on in the building.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
One additional question. Several architects are indicated on the lower left. Can you talk about the collaboration and the roles?
Yes. So STD, our firm, was invited, Sharon Davis Design, to participate in this. Our staff is small. There's 4 designers on record. So we partnered with Marvel Architects to provide a little bit more manpower to get everything done. And then the UN requires an architect of record in Geneva to work with, which was Nomos for us. So they provided a lot of siting, and then Borough Happold was just sort of consulting for the systems. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
We have a bit of time. So that view there is from the bottom right corner of the site, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you talk a little bit about how people will get access to the building and a little bit about the character of what seems to be a very busy street on the right-hand side?
That's correct. Okay, so yeah, the Via Appia is what it's called, and that's the sort of the main collector on the right-hand side. That's sort of the primary vehicular entrance. It's where the bus stop is. And then the building, what we're looking at right now is the Rue de Morillon, which is on the bottom side of the site plan. It's just a 2-lane road, pedestrian access on both sides. They use it to pull in executives and VIPs, so that's kind of why we wanted to front it there for that. Really kind of the entrances had to be looked at with regards to like 3 separate users. You had the public space, which you kind of wanted off this. You wanted the employees who are going to be using it more frequently. So that's that sort of side access we talked about at the beginning on the main side where the bus stop is. And then the VIPs needing to sort of swoop in and then kind of be skirted off to the side and then moved up through the building, which would also be done on this side.
Did you have to provide any parking in the building?
No. So there's a parking garage below under the 2 existing triangular ones that are meant to remain. So we do have a connection through it on level B1 that is not represented terribly well in that axonometric.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more about what's the nature of that landscape piece between the older and the new building?
So the idea was to use, native plantings and everything everywhere. The soil is deep enough that it can support trees sort of moving up. We haven't consulted with the landscape architect yet. That's going to be developed more as we move along. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.